Yes, those are live pictures from Kisumu. We can see some of the legislators there, including Kisumu Central MP Fred Ouda and even MP Outa is a senator now, yes, leading the protesters in Kisumu. The protests have kicked off in Kisumu. Let's come back to Nairobi. Patrick Igunza is outside Anniversary Towers. Let's see what's happening there. Patrick Igunza, you can see you already very well dressed, ready for any kind of action this morning. What's happening where you are? Patrick, can you hear me?
Thank you very much indeed, Freddie. Yes, I can hear you. As you rightly put it, we're pitching camp here at the IEBC headquarters. We are ready to see whether the NASA leaders as well as their supporters will make good their promise or other their commitment that they will be taking to the streets to ensure that they do hold those peaceful demonstrations in protest of IEBC official order section of them. Right now, nothing is actually happening here. What we can see is a heavy presence of police officers who've been deployed here since very early in the morning, just to be on standby should those demonstrations take place anytime from now. You can see the main entrance is well guarded, and these officers are not only at the Anniversary Towers but other areas around this particular place, including the Friends of the Nairobi University, as well as in the roundabouts and other roads that are around this particular area. We are being told by sources that this time round we will be having actually the principals leading their supporters in this demonstration. The intention is to send a clear message that they want reforms at the IEBC, and they want some of those officers there that they believe bungled their August 8th presidential election out of office. And so we are on standby, ready to bring you this action as soon as it starts happening. But right now, we still don't have anything happen. The situation is calm, but police are very much on standby. Freddie.
Patrick Igunza there, looking very ready for any kind of action outside the Anniversary Towers. But as it looks so far, no action at all. Opio and I is still in studio with us, and you can see the police are already there waiting for you.
Actually, I said I would wish to make some few comments and then excuse myself with my colleagues. Okay. Fred, I was saying before you cut me off that it is because of these street protests, these demonstrations, that we've been able to achieve the incremental gains in terms of the opening up of the democratic space and the entrenchment of constitutionalism in this country. And we are in this for the long haul. We're not looking at this thing in terms of the 26th of October date. That date will come and pass, but our agitation will continue for as long as the ills in society are still apparent. Okay? And having said that, the IEBC itself, when you want to see the contradictions, it's very clear. The chairperson of the IEBC, in his first response to the purported amendment bill by the Jubilee faction of Parliament, he was very clear, we thought so, that the amendments were not necessary at this point in time, that they would disrupt their preparedness for the elections. But what do you see yesterday? You see an IBC at war with itself, and you see an IBC which is clearly captured by external forces. So, in the face of all these contradictions, what do you expect us to do? To sit back and sing along with Jubilee and escort them? It's not possible. And we have said again that even that action that they have taken in County Hall through the Cheptumo-led committee is against the Constitution. You will recall, you will notice, Fred, that Kenya is a constitutional democracy, and it is recognized that Kenya is a multi-party democracy as well. And so, if you go to Parliament because of some numerical advantage, and you ram through the throats of Kenyans some bills or amendments simply because you can have the majority, it is not acceptable. What this amendment, proposed amendment, did is meant to achieve, Fred, without any fear of contradiction, is to make it possible for election theft to continue or to be perpetrated without a fear of any sanctions from any authority, including the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And if you look at the gist of the amendment, first and foremost is to make it impossible. In fact, it is to make it, to emasculate the chairperson of the IEBC insofar as the performance of his constitutionally mandated function is concerned.
But just before, a question. Now that you say the cracks within IEBC are so visible, even before I come to the rest of the panelists, then do you think that what NASA is doing will actually remedy those cracks? Because that's what you seem to say.
What we are looking at now is much bigger than even those cracks. And I can assure you, in confidence, that our agitation will yield results.
Okay.
For after how long? Neither here nor there. But more importantly, the moment you set out to transfer powers bestowed on the chairperson of the IEBC to other persons, without going to the Constitution and amending it, attempting to amend the Constitution through the back door by way of statutes, law amendments, then you have definitely crossed the red line.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what we are saying. So whatever is happening in County Hall through the Jubilee Committee is a challenge. It's irrelevant, it's legitimate, we don't recognize it, and we want to continue with this agitation for as long as it takes it, to ensure that we take back the country from the shackles of these oppressors here.
And that's exactly what you'll be doing immediately after you leave this panel.
Correct.
You'll be heading to, but just kindly confirm to us the principals this time round are taking part in the demonstrations. Is that the expectation today?
I don't know who said that. Yeah, we don't discuss our strategies on television.
Okay.
You see the action in a moment's time.
Okay, let me come to my other panelists, and of course, in collecting the submissions and views of the public, of course, the biggest stakeholder in this probably that should have whose opinion should really matter even in these electoral laws is probably the IEBC. Yes. Before you leave, I think Namwamba would like to make his response to you, whatever you've submitted, just before you go.
I can also benefit from the wisdom of my brother Opio, my good neighbor. You see, we have to operate within a system of due process, a system that is anchored on the rule of law. Otherwise, we run the risk of turning this country from a democracy to a mobocracy. We have to draw a line. You are either operating within the confines of the rule of law or anarchy. Now, looking at the judgment delivered by the Supreme Court, they were very clear. Maraga was very clear that on the evidence submitted by NASA, he could not find any grounds to assign culpability to any particular individual within the IEBC. And so you look at that ruling and you see a bench that is pointing fingers at systemic weaknesses within IEBC, and also challenging that institution to take measures that would prevent the recurrence of the incidents of mistakes or even fraud that may have occurred within the system. On what basis, therefore, would NASA be insisting? Because one would have imagined that if NASA had concrete evidence, for instance, that Chiloba was culpable, or any of the officials were culpable, I would have expected that evidence to have been submitted to the Supreme Court, to have convinced the Supreme Court, to have assigned, or to have at the very least to have named, to have been able to pinpoint that yes, there is evidence that culpability could be assigned in this direction. Because when you look at that evidence that ruling in totality, you find a scenario where some of these things culpability could be assigned to presiding officers, whether it's about signing forms or stamping forms or that kind of stuff. So if you want to say that on the basis of the judgment you want to throw the whole IEBC into the dustbin. On what basis? Number one. And then the other issue is the legislative work of Parliament. Parliament, as we say, not only operates on the basis of rules, standing orders, which of course are derived from the Constitution, but there is also, Parliament also works very much on the basis of history, customs, usages, and that kind of stuff. Now, I am reminded that in the year 1999, 2000, when the country started the process that ultimately led us to Bomas, we had a scenario of very sharp divisions in Parliament. And Parliament indeed named a committee. It named a committee to try and shepherd the Parliament and the whole country towards some agreeable position on the reforms needed. That was immediately after, in the aftermath of the 1997 elections. Incidentally, the person who chaired that committee was the NASA leader, Raila Odinga. And a lot of the opposition leaders then, including the leader of the opposition, who would later become President Mwai Kibaki, boycotted that committee. And a lot of the opposition leaders, in fact, the entire official at that time, Raila had joined KANU. He was Minister for Energy in the Moi government, and he had the responsibility. He was handed the responsibility to shepherd that committee. Despite the very sharp disagreements, very sharp disagreements, boycotts, that committee somehow managed to trigger a process that led us to Bomas. And of course, everybody knows that from Bomas we were able then to move further, ultimately to get the constitution we have today. So I'm wondering why, first of all, NASA is ignoring those historical realities, and secondly, why they wouldn't want to engage and affect that process, especially in light of the last amendments, very major amendments we were able to pull off on the whole electoral legal regime through the bipartisan committee that had representation from both sides of the political divide. Why wouldn't NASA take this opportunity, continue with the pressure, because the street pressure, the demonstrations, the picketing, that is perfectly in order, provided it's peaceful, it's not violent. We can avoid the kind of violence since we have witnessed in Kisumu and other places. That is now illegal. That is unconstitutional. But the constitutional picketing and demonstration and the pressure, that is perfectly in order. But why not do that while at the same time also engage Parliament? Yes,
I think that question is directed to
you know, my brother Babu has actually supported my position that every time we have addressed matters to do with electoral reforms in this country, it has taken a bipartisan approach. And it's not that has been possibly because one side loves the other or vice versa. No, it's because of the dictates of the times. And when Jubilee takes an approach in Parliament from the very word go, that we have the numbers, we can constitute the House Business Committee, the mother committee, Babu knows, that sets the agenda of the House, that you can constitute it without you and continue to run the business of the House and go ahead to form as an ad hoc committee to look at the electoral review. Then we can be part of it. Yes, that is the position. But more importantly is that the street protests that are going on have been peaceful. That I must reiterate. They have been peaceful, and they have only turned violent whenever the police have intervened to disrupt them. Okay. That will continue, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Even today you will see.
Babu Namwamba, I hope your question.
I would have loved to know on what basis they want to throw the entire setup of IEBC. Yes. On what?
Okay. Before you respond, one of you, and I understand we do have an update from Siaya. What exactly is happening in Siaya?
Because there is others should go. And lastly, before I leave my colleagues to speak, because you have the deputy governor here and the MP for game, I want to say that we will not allow the big-headed man called Chiloba to preside over this election. If Chiloba will be no peace, there will be no election. How many people do not want Chiloba to be in charge of this election? Now I want to hand over the microphone to my colleague for game. tumelisha jambo. Wananchi power, wananchi killing, wananchi ria. Chilova must go, Chilova must go, Chilova must go, Chilova must go. And I'm saying here, without the irreducible minimum that Honorable Atandi has read, there will be no election in the Republic of Kenya. And I want to say, we as NASA, we are not afraid of election. We are even ready tomorrow, provided the irreducible minimum are done as we have written to IEBC. Governor. No reforms, no election. No reforms, no election. Chilova, and I want to say this clearly here today, that if irreducible minimums are not done and not conducted and addressed by IEBC, the way our party leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, stated, then we shall not have any elections in this country. Not because we are not going to win. We know if you put us one-on-one with Uhuru Kenyatta, we are going to emerge victorious. No reform, no election.
Yes, those are some of the leaders in Siaya. I can see there Samuel Atandi, MP Alego Songa. Just before him, the Deputy Governor was speaking, and before him, Elisha Odhiambo, MP Gem, was speaking as well. But Opio Wanda, you're about to respond to another question that Ababu Namwamba has raised.
In fact, I think it's a very valid question. But let me say this again. You know, lawyers sometimes second and lawyers for people who are not schooled enough. You know, the moment the Supreme Court made a determination in their initial judgment, forget about even the later one, the full judgment, that the IEBC committed irregularities and illegalities in the conduct of the August 8 elections. It needed not to have gone beyond that. There was even no point of going to further to say who was culpable and who was not culpable. It was a total indictment on the IEBC in totality. And we know that there are specific officers who are in charge of various dockets in the IEBC who either presided over this bungling or were negligent in their duties. So on that score alone, common sense dictates that such officers step aside. They cannot be left to run a repeat election and you expect different results. But more importantly, investigations would have to ensue, as is expected in law. But now, who knows how long those negotiations will take? It could take a year, 2 years. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
No. Let's go to that in the middle. Say something. You know, I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here listening to these two Efimiwa, and there's something that is really grating at me. It's because we were treated as a country to some of the most shambolic nominations we have ever seen in this country. Did we disband the political parties? Did we tell the people who got certificates, no, let's not have anything? Mheshimiwa here is sitting because people have elected him and sent him to parliament. To do what in parliament? To represent them. Then we are sitting here being told by our leaders how they will not engage in that which we have elected them to do, but will engage in something else to try and get other people out of office, and constitutionally and procedurally and at a time that is most inopportune for this nation. We have an election coming up on the 26th of April or of October. As Kenyans, the entire of 2017 has been nothing but politics. Now I'm speaking as a Kenyan. We need to get to a place where we have a closure of this issue. If we are talking about reforms, there is reforms that can come from the street. I don't deny. I was alive in 1982, Akusala. I was alive in 1992. I was alive in 1997. I was alive in 2013. I have seen the reform in this nation, part of which has come from the street. And I've seen also that which has come out of IPPG. I've seen that which has come out of Parliament. I've seen that which has come from Krigla and Kofi Annan. There are very many ways this country has been able to move forward. In this point in time, if we are going to have an election on the 26th that is credible, the only person, because the president right now has incumbency, he cannot appoint a new commission even if he wanted to. Right now, the opposition, even if Akina Chiloba acquiesced, and the Chebukati Commission, and they go home, then what? What do? We don't need to be in a crisis mode. For what adventure? As a country right now, we need to get to a place where people are starting exams on the 23rd of October. Others are starting KCP on the 30th of October. We are in a place as a nation where we need to let the important and the urgent be separated. What is urgent right now? We need to have a closure.
Yes.
Because we had 6 elections on that day. 5 of them worked. 1 of them had issues. Now, do you want to say because the entire election was bungled, the entire commission should go? Which commission, by the way? It is the agitation of these politicians that made us adopt an unprocedural means to remove a very experienced commission, put in a rookie commission that was working with an experienced secretariat, and look at the result. Let us get to a place where we say, you know what, let's put Kenya first. Let's put Kenyans first.
What do you have to say to this?
I think it's unfortunate, and you've said this before, in terms of political parties and political actors putting the country at hot in crisis. And this is ongoing. The politicians are advantaged because this is their bread and butter. For the rest of the country, that's not the case. And indeed, I've said this before, the country is getting tired. And the support that NASA assumes it has now will wear out as soon as people start getting hungry and tired of this protest. But that being said, I must also add that what we are seeing from NASA is they're taking upon themselves the role of victim, then the role of judge, then the role of DPP at one go. They went to court, and even before the elections, they went to court for various interpretations of the Constitution. And the court, Supreme Court, even in its judgment, pronounced itself on certain issues. And so it said, as we rightly put it out there, that it did not find any direct culpability, criminal culpability for that matter, on particular commissioners. What it said was that indeed there were certain systemic shortcomings within the commission, largely administrative and operational, and which they are now asking the IBC through its orders to clarify. So what you are seeing NASA doing moving forward is that they're also interpreting that judgment in their own terms to suit their political ends, and moving on with it to create a crisis that will ensure that as citizens we are going round and round in cycles. So I think it is very clear, and we've said this before, there's nothing wrong with NASA and its supporters protesting. It is their constitutional right. But like Joy said, to what end? One. And secondly, what is so wrong in following the due process of the law?
Okay. Boniface.
First of all, I'll start with the judgment of the Supreme Court, which said that the first respondent did not conduct the elections of 8th August in compliance with the law. Therefore, this is a commission that is presumed to know the law, the electoral laws. It is fashioned specifically to follow that law. But then it chose not to pursue what it has been created to do. Therefore, that is, in my opinion, a direct indictment to the commission. Now, before we even go any further, there is a memorandum that Wafula Chebukati wrote asking questions about the electoral process. What happened? Now, the person to whom fingers were pointed was Chiloba, Ezra Chiloba, the CEO. What I'm trying to say is this: if indeed Mr. Chiloba did not participate in bungling the elections, then he is incompetent. It is either he took part in rigging or he is incompetent. Either way, he is not suitable to conduct this election. I was in Butere the other day, and my pastor was complaining to me that he sent somebody to sell his sheep in the market. Somehow, some of the sheep got lost. And then this person came and reported. But now, because this pastor needed money to pay for 1 or 2 things, he had to sell a few more sheep. Will he send the same incompetent seller, trader, to go and sell the other sheep? The answer is no. Okay. Therefore, this is now a matter of common sense. It is not anymore about the law and etc. It is now just common sense. Having said that, what does the law provide? Whenever there is nothing that comes out of nothing that happens in isolation, Whenever the elections are bungled, there is someone who is culpable, there is someone who is benefiting. There is a side of the political divide that is trying to protect its interests very strongly, including amending the election laws, basically changing the system that these elections were held so that it favors them. I am a football fan. There is no way the rules of the game are changed in the middle of the season. The officials can be changed. When an official has committed, has not performed well or has been deemed biased, he will be disciplined, he will be sent to the lower league and in the middle of the season. But whenever the season commences, you cannot now bring in new rules that now this is offside, this is not offside, and that is wrong.
And let's not get into that conversation about the amendments as introduced by the Jubilee side of Parliament. And we saw yesterday when the IEBC came to present, and they have the analysis of the Election Laws Amendment Bill of 2017 by the IEBC, as well as a letter that Wafula Chebukati had written to accompany the analysis. This letter was disregarded by that committee. In the letter, and I think this was the biggest problem, because Wafula Chebukati says that he does not see the need for this kind of laws at this point. Yes, and he says, while the intention to amend some of the provisions of the Elections Act 2011 are deserving and perhaps necessary, the bill as currently crafted will occasion more confusion than it seeks to solve. This is the IEBC chairperson saying this. Yes, the analysis, there are those, and we'll come to the analysis, because as a commission there are those proposed amendments that they accepted. There are those they said, no, please delete that amendment, it will not work now. But according to the chairperson of the IEBC, he says, yes, it could be good, some of the laws need changing, but right now it will cause more confusion. Remember, it is only 19 days. Yes, to go to the election. The Joint Select Committee has now retreated to go write a report with regard to the public hearings, present that report back to Parliament. Then they start a second hearing, probably third reading and all the parliamentary procedure, take it to President Kenyatta for assent, then gazette it before it becomes law within 19 days. Bwana Babu Namwamba, you've served in the National Assembly. You know this law will not be ready up until very few days to the election. Don't you think that, yes, Bwana Chebukati is right in saying that it will occasion more confusion than it seeks to resolve?
I don't see any confusion. I don't see any confusion at all. But first of all, this analogy of changing rules in the middle of a game. Wakili attempts to twist it. Say he starts off by a game and he finishes off with a season. Let's stick to the game. If you cannot change the rules in the middle of the game, you'll not change the referee in the middle of the game either. That's just that's how it goes. We have watched football. Those of us who are football fans, we have watched games where the referee awards a penalty that you feel this is definitely not a penalty. Or he waves a red card, and everybody's like, and every analyst will tell you this red card was not justified. We don't see any situation where in the middle of at halftime everybody now says replace this referee because he's got it wrong. So really, this tendency to engage in double standards is unfortunate. And what I believe is that the legislative work of Parliament has got no limitation. Except by dint of letter and spirit of the Constitution. Only the Constitution can limit the legislative work of Parliament. Parliament can make, unmake, remake any law, provided it is within the confines of the Constitution.
But there's an issue of timing, and Sandra, perhaps this is where people are raising a lot of questions, that yes, we may agree that yes, there are loopholes in our electoral laws that need to be fixed, but the timing, 19 days to the election, the chairman of the IEBC has come out and said, and this is part of his submissions, that it will occasion, as currently drafted, it will occasion more confusion than it seeks to solve. Don't you think we should listen to him?
I've also asked myself the same question as regards timing. Which exactly is the right time? Is it 3 days? Is it 1 month? Is it 1 year? And under what circumstances is this timeline prescribed? And nobody seems to have that answer. So what I am seeing, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists going around. There's a lot of fear mongering going around in terms of how we are handling our election moving forward, and that to me is our biggest hiccup, where we are seeing even the things that are to our benefit, we're trying to see them from deep ethnic and political lenses. So from my end, what I know about these laws, they seek to clarify the processes, fill in certain gaps that the Supreme Court judgment perhaps did not clarify. And the information is out there to see. For example, in terms of seeking accountability for returning officers who do not sign their forms, in terms of cleaning up certain aspects that relate to complementary systems. And even for the IBC, you look at their matrix. I heard yesterday someone say that they're trying to play both sides of the game. They appear not to want to offend either party. So you look at their letter, they say, we agree, but there are certain, it might occasion certain problems. But then you look at their matrix that they presented yesterday, most of the proposals that were made, very few of them said, they rejected very few of them.
They actually supported 6. Yes,
they actually supported
3 partially and opposed 5.
Yes,
so it's 50-50.
It's a 50-50. And perhaps what people are asking, specifically from Chebukati, is that he becomes or appears stronger than he is already, someone who's more decisive, like we've seen with his predecessors, so that we are seeing more leadership from the IEBC. He must not always agree with what the political parties say, but what Kenyans desire right now is not a wishy-washy attitude as we move towards the next election. We need decisive action moving forward, so that even with this, majority of people say we should have seen him say there are certain amendments, yes, they might be detrimental, but this is our suggestion moving forward. This one we reject, this one we accept, with some form of clarity and conviction moving forward.
But Joy, yes, even by rejecting, opposing 5, accepting 3 partially and supporting 6, and this is the entire commission, not just the chairman. The chairman says it is the wrong time. This already indicates that yes, probably this issue needs to be relooked at again, that probably this is not the right time to do this. 19 days to the election, we are still discussing this one. IEBC, which is the referee, says no, we do not agree entirely with what you are doing, even if they may disagree with their chairman, because their chairman wants the whole process halted. Don't you think there's still a problem?
What I read from yesterday, and even from the public participation, is that most of the presenters who came actually said, okay, on this one we see the point, on this one we don't see the point. Let me take the very first one, for example, the provision for the chairman to not be necessarily a lawyer qualified to be a member of the Supreme Court. You'll remember when we were even looking to replace the Isaac Hassan Commission, we had a problem getting a chair, because lawyers who are over 15 years in practice are already established in what they're doing. There are not very many who are willing to come forward. And remember, I've said here before, some of these positions are poison chalices. You take it and it's a career killer. So you'll find the guy who'll be measuring and seeing. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to even find people to occupy that space. And yet there are other qualified Kenyans who couldn't be able to. So even the ones who come to talk about the law itself will tell you parts of it make sense, parts of it don't make sense. But then let's talk about the timing. If you look at the timing right now, it's easy to see that Jubilee, for them, they cannot go on the street, and they have realized, what do we have in our hands? And they said, you know what, as guys have got the opportunity in Parliament, let's go ahead and move it forward. So you cannot ignore the political aspect by Jubilee of doing this at this time. And of course, remember, they had been told when they were leaving the Supreme Court, but then if you go and come back with another election petition that looks like this, be sure we will do the same thing again. Do you think they're going to sit there now as Jubilee? Now I'm thinking as Jubilee, will I sit there and wait to go back, to be taken back to the Supreme Court for the same thing to happen to me again? Because if you look at most of the more they're trying to amend, is sealing those loopholes that were revealed during the
Yet, Joy, even as you talked about our history and you mentioned all the years, and even this bipartisan approaches, most of these laws have been as a result of that, a bipartisan approach. Even last year, the Joint Select Committee that brought together both the opposition and the government, that is what gave rise to what we now use for our elections. Don't you think that it is better to review such laws through such a system, as opposed to now the way we are doing it through one-sided Jubilee Party alone in Parliament? After all, they do have the numbers, we do agree. But don't you think we come out the lesser by doing it that way?
You know, in our current political dispensation, Parliament it's a parliamentary system. So Parliament as a whole is supposed to operate independently of the executive. Now, Artifala made the point that actually our parliamentarians are still behaving as if we're in a system where they're still beholden to the executive. And we can see the NASA-affiliated MPs are still listening to their principal, and the Jubilee-affiliated MPs are still listening to their principal. And hence my growing irritation with the members of the National Assembly, both in the Senate and in the lower house, because they have failed to understand that when they come together, what they decide is autonomous, and they do not have to pander to the interests of the executive. As Parliament, once they are sworn in, they can decide, now that we are in the House, we are in charge of this process, let us do that which has brought us here. And if NASA MPs were in the House, even if they did not carry the day, the Hansard would bear witness. We wanted this change this way. We did not want this change now. We wanted this amended this way. Even these issues about discussing the conduct of the IEBC commissioners and Chiloba. If you go on the floor of the House where you have privilege, you can even put forward very fiery information, and that triggers the whatever process you want to see to amend things. So I've gotten to a place where I wish everybody would be sensitive that Kenya as a country does not need this drama now. I would have been happy if Jubilee had waited till after the elections to say, okay, fine, let us see what went wrong and let's amend it then. But for them, you see that how they're looking at it, it's political expediency. Same thing with NASA, where they're putting pressure is political expediency.
So we do agree that all this push is intended to cure or to remedy the October 26th.
They're trying to remedy what was seen on 8th of August before October 26th.
Quite on the contrary. It is not seeking to remedy anything. It is plunging the whole electoral process into further confusion. Now, first of all, I'd like to politely disagree with what my colleague Joy is saying. We are not in a parliamentary system. We are in a constitutional system where it is not Parliament that is supreme, but our constitution. Both Parliament and executive, as well as the judiciary, do vow allegiance to the constitution. Therefore, the constitution is the ground norm, head and shoulder above all laws, all institutions, all persons, and every activity.
That is fallacy.
Now, there is nothing fallacious about the supremacy of our constitution, because if you look at Article 1, if you look at Article 2, anything that is done that is inconsistent with the constitution, including the work of Parliament, including an order of court, including an act of the executive that runs contrary to the constitution, is to the extent of such inconsistency null and void. Now, it is not fallacious. Number two, I'd like to mention this. This is a political season. It is not a game. It is a season. Therefore, we cannot purport to amend the rules in the middle of the season, because 2017 is a season, and then 2022 is a season. So right now, we are not saying that we want to change the rules. We are not saying that we want to change. The only thing we can change is the personnel who have been indicted, who have refused to come out and say, okay, this person in the secretariat or this returning officer did not do their work. Therefore, unless Chiloba came out and pointed where the cancer is, where the tumor is, we have to amputate the whole organ. Now, what is the problem with this? What is the problem with these amendments? For example, changing the interpretation of chairperson of the commission. To be honest, there is a reason why the chairperson is in fact given an interpretation outside the membership. When you find that the chairperson is absent and the so-called vice chairperson is absent, then any ordinary member can act as chair, notwithstanding that they may not hold the same qualification as the chair. Therefore, it is contradictory. It is a sham. Number two, when you're talking about the quorum of the commission, if you look at Article 250, it's giving the commission a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 9. Basically, these amendments are bringing in a situation where 2 commissioners in a quorum of 3 can make a decision that is legally binding to all the 9 commissioners. And it is bringing, that is risky. With this kind of divisive, divided IEBC commission, you're seeing a memorandum from the chair, then the others, the other time others gave a memorandum, a few others repudiated the same. We are treading on very thin ice. When we are talking about transmission of results, that we know how this came to be from the Credler report, why the recommendation to steal these electoral malpractices. When you find that an amendment is giving precedence to manual results as opposed to electronic results, such that you find that the electronic results are different from manual, how is it possible that a scanned document at the constituency level is wrong and that which now has been brought is right? Are you seeing what we're saying? Therefore, there are too many issues that these proposed amendments are bringing that at this instance they cannot be debated properly. They cannot indeed have any good faith in the interests of the people.
And Babu Namwamba, the question is, because these laws need to be well thought out, if at all you're making the laws for posterity and not just looking at October 26th. But it appears that this push by Jubilee is focused mainly on October 26th, that even after October 26th we might find that yes, these amendments that we are making now could be problematic.
Law is made to cure mischief, and if you have mischief in the room, you have mischief around, you enact the law, and the time is always right to do what is right. The question as to whether the time is right or not really for me is irrelevant. If it must be done, then the time is right to do it. I have sat in that parliament and gone through an exercise where we deliberate on legislation until 3 o'clock in the morning. Absolutely. In the run-up to the last general election, we were working on the amendments to the electoral laws until very late in the day. In fact, I remember IEBC complaining that the legislation would come so late in the day that they wouldn't be able to pull off some of the timelines they had already set. So this question of the time not being right or the time not being sufficient for me is academic. In terms of the practical functioning of Parliament, there is never the question of right or wrong time. The question is always Parliament exercising its legislative mandate as set by the Constitution.
Namwamba, I need to stop you there briefly. We do understand that Joseph Koome, the police boss for Nairobi County, is currently speaking. Let's listen in because it has to do with the protests in Nairobi. We'll come back to this discussion.
And Article 37 allows any Kenyan, any of our people, to demonstrate, to assemble, to picket, but peaceably and unarmed, to any public authority to present any petition. Therefore, we appreciate the fact that that is provided in law. And what we are doing today, and again, is provided in law. We are just deployed, we are deployed in the city to ensure that as whoever intends to demonstrate does that, there is no threat to life or property. That any such demonstration, any such assembly is peaceful. And since morning, we have seen in the city is very calm, very secure, there is tranquility. It is calm. We have not obstructed, prevented anybody from picketing or carrying out his demonstration. We are there just to ensure we discharge our mandate ensuring that life and property is protected, to ensure there is no breach of peace. That's why you can see the heavy deployment of officers, just to ensure that is done. Therefore, if you've been told, there is a group of people or leaders who may come to this IBC headquarters, they are free to do that. However, I insist, we all insist, they must be peaceful. Let us respect the enjoyment, the right of that other person. Anybody attempting to destroy, damage any property, of course, we shall move in to ensure that protection is there. Anybody who has the intention to injure any other person, that one we are not going to allow. Anybody attempting that one will be dealt with firmly according to the law. That is the position. We are not issuing the rest to anybody, but that is the legal position. That nobody should destroy somebody else's property, nobody should injure that other person, and we should not attempt to barricade or block the roads. But so far, the city is calm. There is tranquility. Other than the fire we have in Gekomba, actually, there is no other serious major incident we have in the city, other than the fire in Gekomba, which is already managed. Actually, already almost put off. But it's unfortunate we have had a lot of property destroyed, but the fire is managed. Any clarification on?
Have you established whether
let's first finish it.
With regard to the protest,
yes.
Have you had any incidents in the past protest? There are at least 2 or 3 that have happened before, but maybe require people getting arrested and so on.
Yes, in the recent past, we have had a situation where we disperse people involved in the demonstrations I've talked about, and this is when we see that there is threat to life or property. When there is evidence that there could be 2 rival groups which are just about to attack one another, which could resort to loss of life or injury, we have constitutional mandate to ensure that that does not happen.
Are you going to allow the supporters to camp along university?
Yes, they are free to do that. But as I said, no threat to life, no threat to property. That is what I can't allow. Anybody attempting to injure another one, anybody attempting to destroy property, very swiftly I'll move in and deal with such person. But you are peaceful. We don't derive any pleasure in corroborating our fellow citizens. We do not at all derive any happiness. We don't. But when there is need for us to do that, we shall have to do that with a view of discharging our constitutional mandate, not because of just any other reason.
Joseph Kome, the Nairobi County Commander, giving an update on the security situation in Nairobi. He says the only big event, or the only big security situation currently in Nairobi is the fire at Gikomba. The NASA protests are yet to kick off in Nairobi, but we know that yes, Wanopio and I has already left studio and is heading there. So yes, we are yet to see some action. Currently, you can see live pictures from Mombasa there. Very peaceful protests as demonstrators march through the streets of Mombasa. Meanwhile, Siaya, that's the situation happening there, also appearing relatively peaceful. Not much drama or chaos there. But what's happening in Kisumu? Yes, security officers there ready to tackle any drama there. Let's get an update from Kisumu. Our reporter Sam Ogina is there. Sam, a very good morning. What has been happening in Kisumu this morning?
Well, good morning to you, Fred, at the Communication Center. What you're seeing right behind me is the fortification of the IEBC Center here in Kisumu town. This is where demonstrators, that is the NASA demonstrators, are trying to make their way. Of course, they've been demonstrating and walking all the way from Kondele, and they're supposed to make their way here. We just broke off from them a few meters from here. And why I say this is a fortified area is really because it is an equivalent of government square, if you like, because on my left side rather is actually Kisumu State House Lodge, and that is actually the way that leads here at the IEBC Center. And of course, just before even you get here, you have to pass the county commissioner's office, then the county governor's office, and of course you have to make your way through the State House Lodge. Of course, in the streets there are no security officers, as it were, but what we understand is security officers are trying as much as they can to not provoke demonstrators as they did there is last week when we were here covering those protests. Actually, this week on Monday, and well, this is just now the advanced team that has been able to make their way here. Border riders just chanting that Chiloba must go. Border riders chanting that no elections, no reforms. Of course, no incidences so far. No tear gas throwing. If we can just make our way to cross the road. It's a little bit chaotic, but as you can see, security officers really on standby to make sure that as much as the demonstrators come here, then there is no destruction of property, and if at all they provoke the security officers, or if at all they try stone throwing into the IEBC premises, then security officers here are able to ward them off. And also, just yesterday when we were preparing to come here, we saw reinforcement and fortification of Kisumu town, as it were, and that is water cannons that are synonymous to Nairobi and Kibera area. And as we speak here, the demonstrators have made their way here, just chanting Chiloba must go, chanting no elections, no reforms, carrying stones. But just we see what happens once they are here. It has been more than 30 minutes walk from where they were actually gathered, and that was in Kondele. Now from Kondele, they've made their way here, of course, going to State House Lodge, going to the county commissioner's office. And now, it is a face of security officers, but of course the organizers are just trying to make sure that there is no provocation of security officers by demonstrators, as you can see, trying to control their own, trying to make sure that there is control, there is no provocation, that they pass on their message without any provocation. So probably once the crowd comes down, we'll have to hear from the organizers of this particular demonstration. What is it, or what is their message apart from demanding for the resignation of the IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba, as it were. So we are coming to you from the IEBC headquarters in Kisumu County. This is actually the regional headquarters of Central Nyanza region, as it were. The whole battalion of demonstrators making their way here, carrying placards, carrying stones, carrying leaves and leaflets, branches of trees, and they've come a long way, really. Well, this time round, as you can see, crowd control from the organizers, and as I can see, there is the area senator, the Kisumu town senator, Fred Outa, and Seme member of parliament is equally here. they say they don't want provocation, they don't want a confrontation with the security
Tunasema hivi, leo ni maandamano ya amani. Tunasema hivi, hawa polisi hatutaki vita nao. Tumekuja hapa kutembea haki yetu kama watu wa Kenya. Tuko na seneta, inafaa ongea na nyinyi.
Your live pictures there from Kisumu and Mombasa. The sound you are hearing is from Kisumu, where we do have members of the National Assembly and the Senate leading the demonstrations there. We saw Kisumu Senator Fred Outa, Kisumu Central MP Fred Ouda, and it's very tricky. If you get the pronunciation wrong, then you confuse the two gentlemen. Also, what's happening in Mombasa as well. Time now for a break. When we come back, we continue monitoring what's happening in various places, including in the city center, plus that fire at Gikomba. Plus, we continue this discussion on the different routes that both sides, NASA and Jubilee, are taking towards achieving a better process come October 26th. That after the break.